Hi, this is Bernstein. I'm the host of the On the Economy blog, and we've been trying to do a series now of these video discussions with people I really like talking to, like Jim Horney here, who's the Vice President for Federal Fiscal Policy here at the Center on Budget. And what Jim and I wanted to talk about today is a balanced budget amendment. So let me start out. What is the balanced budget amendment, and why are we talking about it now?
Balanced budget amendment is an amendment to the Constitution that would say each and every year the United States is supposed to have a budget that's in balance. That means that spending does not exceed revenues. We're talking about it now. I think we've talked about it in the past. This isn't the first time it's come up. It's come up over the decades. And it's because people think, well, gee, we ought to have a balanced budget. They're frustrated that the federal government has in fact run deficits. They haven't raised revenues enough to cover the spending that we do. Right. And they say, why don't we write into the Constitution? We have to balance it.
So why not? What's wrong with the idea?
It's a really bad idea. First of all, we really don't have to have a balanced budget. We certainly are running deficits right now that are really large. Now that's largely because of the economic downturn, and in fact it helps keep us from going deeper into the economic hole. But in the long run, under current policies, we're facing deficits that are way too large. We should get them down. We have to, but we don't have to balance them. What we have to do, bring deficits down to a level somewhere below 3% of GDP that would keep our debt from rising constantly as a share of the economy. That's the danger.
But can we do that, which you've written about for years as a goal, and I've learned from reading a lot of your thoughts on that. But can we do that without a balanced budget amendment?
Absolutely, we can.
And so how?
We can do it the way we have done it at times in the past, where members of Congress, Republicans and Democrats and the President really get together and have the political will to make the decisions about putting revenues and spending in line. We did this back in 1990, for instance. The first President Bush, Democrats and Republicans, Congress came together, they raised revenues, they cut spending, and they put us on a path that actually did achieve a balanced budget by the end of the decade. So it can be done without a constitutional amendment if the Congress and the President have the will to do it.
And what I heard you just say is that it can be done with partisans actually getting together in a way that they are having a great difficulty doing right now. We have this report we just put out here from the Center on Budget by our colleague Richard Kogan, which looks at the analysis of a balanced budget amendment and its impact on the economy. And it says that if in 2012 such an amendment were in place, the cuts and all the balance came through spending cuts, it would have meant $1.5 trillion of cuts, and this would have thrown 15 million more people out of work and virtually doubled the unemployment rate from 9 to 18%. Now those sound like crazy numbers, and I don't care what kind of politician you are. I don't think anybody wants to do that, to the American economy. Why, if that's anywhere near true, why would these politicians, and it's not just a few of them, be so interested in amending the Constitution with a balanced budget amendment?
Unfortunately, I think to a large extent it is that they want to be able to tell the folks back home that they're doing something about deficits. They're finding it hard to reach agreement on raising the revenues we need to raise, cutting the spending we need to do. And often when you can't agree on policies, the Congress turns to process. This is viewed as a process. And they
is the super committee another example of that?
The super committee is another example of that. They couldn't reach agreement on things. They said, okay, we'll have a process super committee, and if the super committee fails, we'll have this automatic spending cut. But what it means is that it's easy for politicians to promise that we're going to put this thing in place that will make us do the right thing in the future. Now the problem is it doesn't make you do the right thing. And it doesn't force them to reach agreement on spending and revenues. And the problem is if you put this in the Constitution, then you come into a time when there is an economic downturn. And if you don't waive it, you have the results that macroeconomic advisors had, made the economy much worse, much deeper recession.
Because you can't expand your deficit spending at all to address the demand shortfall.
The economy starts going down, if you have to cut spending or raise revenues to try to keep in balance, that makes things worse. It reduces aggregate demand. It means more people get laid off, then there are less taxes. You have to cut more.
It takes countercyclical policy out of the equation.
Absolutely.
Right?
It means you can't even use the automatic stabilizers,
Which are like
that revenues go down.
Unemployment insurance.
Automatic unemployment insurance goes up, things that help to stabilize the economy. Now, some of the proponents would say, well, of course, in those situations, we'll waive it. We can, with the 3/5 vote, say, let's set this aside. But I think the problem is you can't count on that. And all you have to do is look at last year, where we came to the brink of a default for the first time in the nation's history, because we were having trouble rounding up votes for a debt limit. And everybody knew the terrible consequences of not raising the debt limit, and we still almost didn't do it. And we didn't have a supermajority vote there. So putting in a supermajority vote to set aside this. By the way, the balanced budget amendment that will be considered next week also requires a supermajority vote to raise the debt limit. So it really creates an enormous hurdle.
All right. Well, there you have it, folks. A balanced budget amendment, a process-oriented solution that sounds extremely problematic from Jim's perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared.